Okay, we're going to start. The next topic is going to be about the essence of what is the human being, the various parts of his soul. We've spoken about creation, evolution, the purpose of creation, what was the purpose of all the stars and the galaxies, what happened to the dinosaurs. And now we've come to man. Very important part of creation we need to understand, not so much tonight as what is his purpose, but what is he made up of? How is he different? You may have heard the story from me, I'll just repeat it. There was once a professor who asked his class if they could tell him what is the difference between a human being and an animal. And each one raised his hand to suggest something else. One said, well, human being has the ability to speak. And the professor said, well, I have a parrot that can do that too. Well, the human being is smart. So the professor said, well, dolphins are smart too. And so on. Every student said something else, and the professor responded that certain animals were very similar in their capabilities to human beings. And therefore his conclusion was that there is no difference in quantity, there is in quality. It's a qualitative difference. According to him, everybody is the same, just that human beings are better, have a better brain, have better ability to speak and communicate. That is his opinion, of course. That is not the opinion of Judaism, of the Torah. We know that human beings are very different than animals in more than just one way. It's not just the quality, it's the quantity. We have something that the animals don't have. Well, let's figure out what this human being is made out of. First of all, as you know, Hebrew Lashon HaKodesh gives us a lot of clues, because the words are not just randomly chosen. The words are composed of letters which have significance. And it's important to pay attention to the roots. You can gain a lot of information from words, meanings, by looking at what letters make up the word. Adam is made up of the letters, same letters, of Adamah. In other words, man comes from earth. Ki afarata v'la'afarata tashuv. You come from earth and you will go back to earth. So, in the word Adam, we find one of his compositions, or one of his elements, and that is earth. Not only that, even the word dam, in the word Adam, you have the word dam, which is blood, which is what makes life. Without blood, we could not remain alive. So that is the earthy element, or that is the physical portion of every human being, that we are all from earth, we all have blood in us. Okay. But that is not all, because if we go back to the creation, we find that in forming this human being from the Adamah, from the earth, who's the one that does it? Hashem himself. Vayivra et ha'adam. He creates him. As opposed to what? As opposed to everything else having the earth bring out. The earth brought out the animals. Even though, of course, everything comes from Hashem, but when it comes to the creation of the human being, Hashem is much more involved. Hashem, Kavyachol, with his own hands, is involved in the creation of this human being. Why does this particular formation or creation stand out so much that Hashem is involved? Because obviously he is more important, the human being is much more important, and perhaps because there is something else that is being given to this human being that the animals do not have. So in other words, it's not just another animal. There's something else to him. And what is that something else? Another pasuk reveals us, and that is Vayipach be'apav nishmat hayim. That when HaKadosh Baruch Hu made or formed the human being from earth, he also blew into him a nishmat hayim, a living soul. Now the Zohar says, the fact that the pasuk says, or the pasuk reads, Vayipach be'apav, Man denafach min dile nafach. Whoever blows, when you blow a balloon, you're blowing your own air into the balloon, right? So Kavyachol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is blowing something of himself into the human being. Vayipach be'apav nishmat hayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave of himself, gave something of himself into this human being. And that is what the Zohar means when it says that the neshama that we all have is a chelek eloka mimal. It is a divine being. It is something from above. It is something that was given to us from Hashem. So basically what we have in us as human beings is two parts. One is the guf, the physical body that comes from the earth. And there's something else which appears invisible, which cannot really be seen, but can be observed in certain ways, as we will see. And that's called the neshama, and that comes from above. Why is it called neshama? Anybody know? I just explained why Adam is called Adam, because it comes from Adama. What does the word neshama come from? For those of you who know Hebrew, neshima, right? Neshima, breath, is the same word or same root as the word neshama. Why? What does one thing have to do with another? It's not just because that is the way Hashem blew it into us, but because in Judaism, death is determined if there is a lack of neshima. You put a feather by the nostrils of one that you suspect left this world to determine if he actually died. We don't feel the pulse. We don't check for brain waves. What determines death according to the halacha is if there's no neshima. Now obviously, in order for that to happen, for you to be certain, you have to wait. Some people know how to hold their breath for a while. So, but once you determine after a while that there's no breath, that's enough to determine that the individual passed away. And this is an important point because B'ezrat Hashem, either next week or 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about something called near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, where the individual appears to be dead, but he's not completely dead. That's very important. You don't want to bury somebody that is not completely dead. I mean, there have been people who were knocking at the door of the refrigerator of the morgue. Let me out of here. I'm still alive. Right? So we need to know these things. What determines death? So the first clue as to what the human being has on the spiritual end is the word neshama that was blown into him. Blown by who? By HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What about this neshama? What is this neshama made out of? What does it look like? Well, we don't know exactly what it looks like. All we do know is what the Torah tells us about it. The Torah describes this neshama being betzalmenu kidmutenu. Naaseh Adam betzalmenu kidmutenu. Right? Hashem tells all the angels who are already created, let us make man betzalmenu kidmutenu. Now, literally translated, those words mean as follows: betzalmenu, in our image, kidmutenu, in our form. But that, of course, brings up a famous question. God has no form, has no image. Chaz v'shalom, we're not allowed to even imagine a form or shape, because he has none. So therefore, those words cannot mean what they read. They must have some other meaning, betzalmenu kidmutenu. And they do. First of all, the fact that Hashem is telling everybody else, Naaseh, let us go ahead and make. He needs help? He doesn't need help. He could say, I want to make, I'm going to do. So there's various explanations given as how this shows humbleness. But it's more than just humbleness, Hashem turning to others. Let's take part in this creation. What he's really saying is, we're about to create an individual, a human being, down below here, that will be similar to you guys. He will have a part of him that will be like a malach, like an angel. He will be spiritual. That is the tzalmenu. The tzalmenu is that he will resemble the upper or the higher entities that exist in the upper worlds, like angels. He will walk on two, not on four. He will face up, because a portion of him was taken from above. That is one interpretation of what tzalmenu means. But Kidmutenu is also very important. Tzalmenu tells us that he will not look like an animal, except for some people behave like animals, but at least he will not look like an animal. He will be very different in how it will appear. But he will also be endowed with Kidmutenu. What's Kidmutenu? So Rashi brings down that he has the koach that animals do not have, the ability of lehavin ulehaskil. He has the ability to comprehend. He has intelligence. What for? Those abilities of lehavin ulehaskil are necessary because what the neshama is really endowing him with, what is really giving him, what he really needs it for, he has a body that functions just like animals. What is the neshama giving him that he needs that animals do not have? Lehavin ulehaskil are tools in order to do what? In order to give him the ability to choose. Bchira chofshit, as we call it in Hebrew, free will, is a very important part of the human being. We're not robots, and we're not entirely like animals that live just by instinct. If we do something, we are responsible for it because we've made a decision to do so. Those decisions, or the decision process, the making of decisions comes about in the mind through the tools of lehavin ulehaskil, or through bechira chofshit, through free will. And that is the very important difference between animals and human beings. We have free will. We have something that animals do not have. We're therefore very different from animals. And that koach, or that ability, those tools are given to us through the neshama. Because the body, the flesh, the bones do not have the ability to think, does not have the sechel, does not make choices. It is the neshama. The neshama, therefore, rabbis call it the captain of the ship. The body being like a ship, drifting in the ocean, and the captain, the neshama, steering it. With the help, of course, of the wind, with the help of the water, with outside help too. But the neshama is the captain that makes the most important decisions. In another lecture, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk more about what is this free will, which areas do we really have free will, where can we make decisions, and where we are limited. Plus, we'll talk about a very interesting topic, is that, okay, the neshama has finally come down here. How is she supposed to know what to do? How does she know what her mission is? As I've explained in the past, when we spoke about the purpose of creation, the purpose of life, there's a purpose. Everything is by design. Every individual has a mission. Every animal has a mission. We need everybody who's around. Even cockroaches, right? Remember that? There's a need for everything. There's a certain balance in creation. So B'ezrat Hashem, another time, we'll talk about how does one know what he's here for, what is his unique mission, what is he supposed to accomplish, how one can tell. But this neshama is a very important part of us because it's the one that really makes the decisions. So we need to become familiar a little bit with this neshama. What is the neshama made up of? So the Kabbalah, when we talked about the Kabbalah, we may have gone through a little bit of it, so some of it may sound familiar to you. And a lot of this material, this information, by the way, is to be found in the Zohar and other books of Kabbalah. This is a very difficult area. We don't fully understand it. But approximately, this is what is brought down. The neshama is comprised of 5 parts. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yachida. The one that you will come across most often are the first 3. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Chaya and Yachida, most people haven't even heard of. But I'll tell you briefly what each one is. There's a pasuk in Mishlei, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. Shlomo Melech tells us a little bit about the qualities of this neshama, that it's like a candle. It illuminates the entire body. The Kabbalah talks about lights. There's different kinds of lights. There's an or pnimi, there's an or mekif, there's or yashar, there's different kinds of lights in the Kabbalah. There's the or of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're not talking about a physical light, obviously. We're talking about a spiritual light. So what is this light? What does this light do? The light illuminates the body. The light gives direction to the body. The light envelops the body. And there's a very interesting lecture by some experts who have done a lot of research about something called the aura. A-U-R-A. Have you heard about that? They've taken photographs with special machinery, special cameras, that shows different lights around the body. And one can tell the physical health of the body, or of the neshama perhaps, by seeing the different colors around the body before you put on tefillin and after you put on tefillin. When you make a blessing or when you curse someone, different things come out, different colors are formed. A fascinating topic that they're just discovering today, which of course was already written in the Kabbalah in other words. So there's all sorts of lights around us. The neshama, the nefesh, and the ruach are more internal. They are lights that contained within us. They do something to the body. Whereas the Hayan Yechidah, as I will explain briefly, is more on the outside of the body and not internal. So let's begin with the nefesh. But before we go on, I just want to remind you, regardless of the parts that we talk about, the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama, the fact that they're all part of the neshama, they're all spiritual. None of them are physical. Only the body is physical. Each one of them is the spiritual part of the human being. The nefesh, however, is the lowest form. Nefesh, many times you will find together with the word behemi. Ha-nefesh ha-behemi, the animal spirit. Because this animal spirit is the one that contains all the ta'avot, all the desires, the earthly desires, to eat, to sleep, to rest, to enjoy life. You will also find the term ki adam hu nefesh in the Torah. The blood is the nefesh, because the blood is what runs the body. In the same way the nefesh is the engine, the manoah. It's the one that gives us the drive. It's the closest to the physical body. All three are enveloped within the body. All three are all pretty much together, but each one is located, has a separate seat, mishkan, in this goof, a separate seat in the body. The nefesh, the mishkan of the nefesh is in the kaved, in the liver. And therefore, it is the closest to the physical body as pertains ma'asim, actions. All actions are directly related to the nefesh, and the nefesh is the one that's affected by ma'aseh. In other words, if one does a ma'aseh, a deed, whether it's good or bad, what part of his neshama will be affected? The nefesh. It affects everything else too. It has repercussions, of course. But the one that's responsible, the one that's doing it, the one that's involved in the ma'aseh, is the lowest part of the neshama, that one that's closest to the body. Because we're talking about the olam ha'asiyah, right? We talked about four worlds, Atzilut. We talked about Beriah, Yetzirah. Asiyah is the lowest one. It's the physical realm, the physical world. And the nefesh is associated with that world, the world of action. And that's the chelek, as we said, the chelek ha-behemi, the more animalistic, the one that controls the desires. This nefesh, the Kabbalah teaches us, the essence of this part of the neshama, its whole essence is the desire to receive. It wants for itself. Whereas the other end, the neshama, is exactly the opposite. Its essence is the desire to give, to do for others. Very, very, very different. And in between them is a ruach. The ruach, which is called the spirit, that ties between them. The nefesh is tied to the body. The neshama is, of course, the more spiritual. The ruach is a bridge between the spiritual and the more physical. We've explained a little bit of what the nefesh is. Being the lowest one, it's the most physical. So what is Ruach? Ruach is the one that is the driving force of the regashot, of the emotions, the feelings. Those are not physical, right? When you're happy, when you're jealous, when one is arrogant, when one is fearful, when one loves, all of that is an expression of the Ruach. The Ruach is one step higher than the physical, right? These feelings and emotions that I just mentioned are not physical. It's not food, it's not that you eat and sleep, right? It's one step higher. And this, I talked a little bit about this when we spoke about evolution. And how could evolution explain sentiments and feelings? How did they evolve? And they're not even physical. They are completely in the Ruach. They're completely spiritual. One step higher and above the Nefesh. Where is the Mishkan of the Ruach? Where is the seat of the Ruach? In the heart. So therefore, what is affected by the Ruach? Speech. The next higher step after the Asiyah, after the actions, is the speech. That ability that animals do not have, to communicate. And this Ruach, of course, is affected by what one says. Not only is it responsible for what one says, it's also affected by what one says. And now we've come to the Neshama. Neshama is the Chelek HaSichli. It's the one that controls the mind. It's the more intellectual. It's higher than the feelings and the emotions. It's one above all. And therefore the Mishkan, or the seat of the Neshama, is in the Moach, is in the brain. Yes, in that piece of jelly, gray jelly, called the brain, that is where the Neshama is. And it's mushpat, it is affected or controls the thoughts. Where does everything begin? Not in the Olam HaAsiyah, not down below in the actions. There must have been a thought beforehand. A hirhur, a machshava. In Kriyat Shema we talk about lo taturu achrei vavchem v'achrei einechem. Lo taturu, right? Don't go after your thoughts, after what your heart desires. In other words, we're not even talking about action yet. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't let these thoughts permeate your mind. Don't have that curiosity to begin with. Don't look at certain places, because that will lead to certain actions. It starts in the machshava, it goes down to the dibur, then it goes to the maaseh. Machshava, the thought; dibur, the speech; maaseh, the action. So it first forms in the area called machshava, in the thoughts, in the neshama. This is approximately the difference between the various functions of the neshama, divided into those three: nefesh, ruach, neshama. So what's the haya and the yehida? As I said before, those illuminate from the outside and have a totally different function. Most people do not even have them. Haya, as the word sounds, life, receives the nourishment from above, continuous nourishment from above. There's like an umbilical cord connected to us at all times from above. Yehida comes from the word echad, one, because that is the part of the neshama that unites with its root, or with the source, which is Hashem. What difference does it have? I mean, what difference does it make to us? The Hayan Yehida. So according to one opinion, according to one explanation that I've seen, was that they illuminate, or they become very strong when certain individuals do certain mitzvot. Then they become illuminated, or they affect us in a certain way. The Hayan Yehida. Other than that, you will not really come across, you will not notice them. Most of the time, you will just see the term neshama. The reason why most of the time you will see the word neshama is because neshama usually represents what? The spiritual part of the human being, as opposed to his physical. But is it really the neshama? No. Not necessarily. We could be talking about the nefesh. And that's what I'm going to talk about soon, is when does one have one and not the other. But before we get to that, just another little interesting point about neshamot. There are various kinds of neshamot. There are various categories or levels of neshamot. And this is another Kabbalistic topic. Where do the neshamot come from? They come from a tree of neshamot, different branches. And this is a very big topic. The only thing we need to know today about this area of levels of neshamot is that because neshamot come from different places, they have different tafkidim, different missions. Not everybody becomes chief rabbi, not everybody becomes a chazan, not everybody becomes a teacher or a diamond dealer or shoemaker. Depending on what his mission is, depending on where the root of his soul is. So the root of the soul is important, so we could figure out what we need to do in this world. It's also important for another topic that we'll discuss at a later date, and that is Gilgulei Neshamot. Reincarnation. Very important topic as to what happens to the soul, how many times it comes back, why is it coming back, what is its tikkun, what is its mission. These neshamot being from different places presents another very interesting phenomena. Whoever is from the same shoresh neshama, whoever is from the same root of the soul, feels very close to that individual. So people can feel very close to each other if they're from the same shoresh neshama. They can't explain why they feel close. They have a lot to do with each other in life. They come across each other a lot. Their lives cross, I think that's the way you say it in English. And there's a certain depth to that relationship because they're from the same shoresh. People who have the same Hebrew name also may have a certain affinity for each other. Plus, people, of course, from a similar mazal, astrologically speaking, of course, will feel a great deal of chemistry with each other. So all of this is just a very interesting point.
What do you mean same shoresh?
Same root.
I understand.
Nachon.
What do you mean like?
From the same shoresh of the neshama in the olam of the neshamot. It's a very difficult topic to comprehend why there's a need for that, or why there's different shorashim and how this is expressed. But all we know is that in the olam of the neshamot, there's different kinds of neshamot. For example, according to the Kabbalah, every neshama in its formation is comprised of or consists of zachar v'nekeva, male and female. And when we speak about B'ezrat Hashem in a couple weeks or months about zivugim, about soulmates, we will talk about that, the zachar and the nekeva of the same neshama. So it's a very big topic, this topic of neshamot, but we don't have too much information on it. All we know is that there is such a world of neshamot. There are shorashim. There's even parent neshamot. Your child, even though he's your physical child, in the world of neshamot, he could be your parent. He could be your father or your grandfather. You could have given birth to a girl who in a previous lifetime was your mother's aunt. Your mother's aunt came back. And who's she going to come back to? Well, the best place is in the same family. Sometimes that's how it works. So it's a fascinating topic, the topic of neshamot. But we don't fully comprehend the mechanics of it. What is that? That's right, yeah. All right, so how do they enter the body? And a lot of that is found in Sharia Gilgulim. A lot of information you will find in that sefer. That's true. The what? The number of what?
I'm sorry, the number of types of the neshamot. Like the certain thing.
Yes, there is. Yeah, no, there's quite a few terms, but that's for some other time. I don't want to go over into that area right now. Yeah, we need to look into it later. Yeah. Anyway, so how do they enter this world? How do they, in other words, how does one receive, and what does he exactly receive? If this is your first Gilgul, even though this is a different topic, Gilgulei Neshamot Reincarnation, I still have to mention it because this will explain to us how they arrive. If this is the first time a neshama came down to this world, it is capable of receiving all three. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Nefesh at birth, Ruach at bar mitzvah age, and Neshama at the age of 20. If everything goes well with this individual, it does what it's supposed to, stays out of trouble, Hu yachol liskot. He can get to all three levels. Now, if he does, now we're talking, I just said the levels because in the Kabbalah, even though I just said before they're all really one and they are together, in the first Gilgul, they come at different times because they are different levels. Whoever is Zochet to Ruach, whoever is Zochet to Neshama, he's Zochet to additional lights, additional illumination, additional enlightenment. He's almost like a totally different person, different abilities. You've heard of the term Ruach HaKodesh? Ruach HaKodesh, a Holy Spirit. That's also a dargah, a certain level that one is able to reach, to attain while he's alive. So the same thing is with the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. If one just has the basic nefesh, all right, that's fine. You could be a very good person with the basic nefesh. But one who's zochet to ruach, zochet to neshama, he's able to attain much higher levels and different abilities, perhaps. And it expresses itself in a totally different way. However, in future Gilgulim, if he did not do what he was supposed to, and he comes back a second, a third, a fourth time, then, as in most people is the case, he does not receive all three. He receives the basic nefesh. Most of us probably have just the basic nefesh, maybe also the ruach. Unless you're here for the first time, which is very rare, right? Then you may be able to have all three. But otherwise, most people just have the basic nefesh. And depending on the zechuyot, depending on what merits they acquire, or what their tikkun is, the second or third gilgul, they may have the nefesh and the ruach, or the nefesh, ruach, and the shama come down. So in future gilgulim, is very different than in the first gilgul. That's the only point I wanted to make, that don't be confused as, what do I have right now? Well, it all depends if this is the first time, if it's the second time, what needed to be accomplished. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Is there any difference between a nefesh and the shoma on the one hand of the Jew?
Yeah, that's my next point. That's my next point. Yeah. So anyway, what we all have is at least a nefesh. So wait a minute. What about what I said before? The abilities, the intellect, the emotions. Didn't we say that that is in the ruach? That is in the neshama. If we all have the nefesh, then how come we are able to have all these feelings, sentiments, and the sechel? If all of that is controlled by the neshama and by the ruach, not by the nefesh. You understood the question here? Because the nefesh is the main driving force behind the human body. The other ones, we call them levels, which perhaps you may be zochet to acquire or not. Then what about those other expressions of intellect and emotions that are from the ruach and from the neshama? They are in the nefesh too, because the same nefesh has also a neshama shel nefesh, a ruach shel nefesh, and a nefesh shel nefesh. That same basic nefesh that we all have is also subdivided into those three. You can have in the dargah of ruach or dargah of neshama, neshama shel neshama. You could have that too. But in the basic nefesh, we all have those expressions. They are, after all, the ones that control the feelings, the emotions, right? Yirat shamayim, ahavat Hashem. Where does that come from? Not from the nefesh sheba nefesh. It comes from the ruach sheba nefesh or the neshama sheba nefesh. And you will see soon why that has to be so. What about goyim, non-Jews? Well, everybody has a nefesh. We say that is the ikar that drives the human being to do what he does. That is the spiritual part of every human being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. Animals have also a living spirit. Right? Vayi Adam lenefesh chaya. Nefesh chaya, the living spirit, which is similar to the animal spirit, except that his living spirit is from above, including goyim, everybody. And the animals is from below. This living spirit is nonetheless different by the Jew and by the non-Jew in the levels. Remember we spoke about the level of the Ruach and Neshama. According to the Kabbalah, the non-Jew does not have the dargah of Neshama, the level of Neshama. That's the basic difference between except, of course, if he converts. When a non-Jew converts, he receives what the Kabbalah calls nefesh hager, a special nefesh, which boosts his soul to come to the level of a Jew. And that's important, of course, to boost that level in order for him to be able to experience whatever the neshama needs to experience. Yes?
Where is the Neshama of Shabbat?
That's a good question.
And also,
I wasn't planning on talking about it, but you're right. Since we're talking about neshamot and nefashot, we should mention that on Shabbat there's a concept called nefesh yetera or neshama yetera, which is also has to do with how one feels. It's a certain level of experience. Shabbat is a holy day, and if one observes Shabbat properly, you really feel differently. Try eating leftovers from Shabbat on Sunday. It doesn't taste the same, right? Because what's in the cholent or in the hamin, besides the love that one put into making it, is an ingredient called Shabbat. It has a neshama of its own. So this additional neshama, we don't fully understand, but what it is a certain expression, a certain way one feels, or on a certain level that one is able to get to, on condition, of course, that he does everything properly, that he feels different. He feels so different that the rabbis say that whoever really has it feels the Shabbat as being 1/60th of Olam Haba. The feelings of ecstasy that we will have in the world to come is an incredible feeling that cannot be described in physical terms. So that feeling can be observed or experienced a little bit on Shabbat. How? Through the neshama yetera that allows us to elevate ourselves, to a certain spiritual level, that whatever you learn on Shabbat, you will grasp differently. So if you don't get angry on Shabbat, if you observe Shabbat properly, then you should be able to feel a big difference on that day. Remember, Shabbat is also blessed the day. So everything on that day is different. It's not an ordinary day. Ken?
I want to add something. This Zohar
Yeah.
says that the future, in Olam Elyon, the women, if they have the Sachar, what's happening up there. So Rabbi Shimon says that the women, the nighttime, they are involved again in that body of life, and they are with their husbands again.
Nachon.
The babies have been created, the
Neshamot have been
they are the ones being given to the Ger Tzedek.
To the Ger Tzedek. That's the tzaddikim. Not just any men and women, the tzaddikim. The tzaddikim.
The Gerim.
Right. The Gerim receive that nefesh from the tzaddikim. Right. Right.
It says sometimes a person he picks the nefesh, he picks the ruach.
Nachon.
When he gets somebody comes in the ger, they give him the ruach of that person to fix it. And when he fixes it, he comes to him and says, "What are you doing this?"
Bezrat Hashem, we'll talk about it when we speak about Eibur and Gilgulim and Dibukim. Yeah.
That especially Neshama that you spoke about.
Yeah.
That would be on the highest level above Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama.
Who will? Which
The
one?
that comes from Shabbat?
No. That's just like an additional boost to the neshama that you already have. It's not something completely different. It's not on a very, very high level like the level of the real neshama. Yeah. This nefesh, that is the basic one, is the one that you will find on the kever for 12 months after the petira. Man dies at the ripe old age of 89. You go to the funeral, you hear the eulogy, you go home, but he's there. The nefesh is there for 12 months at that kever. You can go talk to him. He listens. He can hear you. You can't hear him, usually not, right? But he hears you. He's there all the time for 12 months. The ruach, if he has the ruach goes to Gan Eden Atachton. There's a Gan Eden down here below in our world, in a different dimension, but it's here. And then there's the neshama that goes to Gan Eden HaElyon. These three meet on Rosh Chodesh. They are joined together just like they were joined in this physical world at certain times of the year. Rosh Chodesh, I think Shabbatot, Chagim. This nefesh that was there for 12 months, after 12 months it's gone. It's not there. You come to the cemetery and you pray there, he's not listening to you. Except if it's the day of the Yortzeit. That's the importance of the Yortzeit. The Askara, the Ilula, the day of the passing of the Neshama is called in Yiddish the Yortzeit. Yeah, you go there on that day, he can listen to you. He's there. The nefesh comes back on that day. No, we still go. I'll tell you why. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, why do people go to the Kever of Tzaddikim, even when it's not their side?
Very good question. That's similar to what she's asking. Anybody want to suggest what's the purpose of going to the Kever of Tzaddikim if the Tzaddik is not there? And especially according to one opinion, the Kabbalah, that many Tzaddikim were already transferred to Eretz Israel, so there's nothing left there. If you were to open up the grave, you wouldn't find anything. Yes, good question. Yeah.
It gives your prayers a multiplier effect.
Yes, it does definitely. It does help. That one's prayer at the kever of the tzaddik. After all, this was his resting place. It has a certain kedusha, if you can call it that. It has a certain importance. One's prayers can be more intense. That's simple, right?
The tzaddikim never died, as we know.
Okay.
Tzaddikim descendants, they were caring about Israel, about their brotherhood.
Right.
And they are also always, they are given permission to be there all the time.
Okay.
By bending to the tzaddik, they bend to Hashem. So Hashem doesn't...
Very good point. When we pray to the tzaddik, remember we're praying to Hashem. We're asking the tzaddik to go before the kiseh kavod. We're not asking the tzaddik to do, because the tzaddik is powerless. He can't do anything. You have to be very careful. You're asking the tzaddik to be a messenger, to go before kiseh kavod and ask Hashem. So we're really praying to Hashem. When we go to the kever of the tzaddik, we're praying to Hashem b'zchut the tzaddik that is residing here, unless it's the yortzeit of the tzaddik. But there's something else that many of you perhaps have never heard of, and that is another reason why we go to the kever of the tzaddik. Even though the tzaddik is no longer there, even though the neshama is long gone, there's something called hevla de garmeh. The Zohar talks about the vapor of the bones, if we can translate it that. There's on a very, very low level of the nefesh something called hevel shel atzamot, havla de garmeh. There's something always that will always remain in the kever until tchiyat hametim, until the resurrection, until the bodies will come back again. There's always going to be there something. Now, of course, if a person drowned in the sea, was eaten up by a shark, that's a little bit of a different story. But if there is a makom that's where he's there, and there's no, even if there's a road over it, there's still something there. There's still something there. So whenever you go today to Kivrot Shel Tzadikim in Eretz Israel that are long gone, there's still something there. And that something there is important because of something called in Kabbalah Hishtatchut al Kivrot Shel Tzadik. Hishtatchut is a very difficult concept for us to understand. It means that one who's from the same Shoresh HaNeshama, especially as the Tzaddik, can actually communicate with that Tzaddik by making a connection when he's mishtateach, when he bows down, spreads his hands and feet on that kever. Don't ask me how it works because I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
From Morocco.
Yeah.
He gives you water.
He gives you instructions?
No, he gives you water.
All right. Yeah.
He gives water out of the...
Yeah.
The nefesh of Ruach Hashanah,
right.
when he born, he got nefesh.
Yeah, we already said that, but אני רוצה לסיים אחרי זה נעבור, אני כבר דיברתי על זה. All right. So, as you can see from all of this, that it's not a simple matter, this whole business of nefesh neshama. Whenever you do go to a cemetery, however, I tell people, in case it's not the yortzeit, you can call her or him. Because the way to do it is as follows. At almost any given moment when you're in a big cemetery, there is some neshama that it's someone's yortzeit then, at that point. And you say, I promise to give tzedakah leilun that neshama that is around right now, that hears me, if she or he calls my grandfather. And every neshama wants to be zocheh, wants to have the merit of more tzedakah, and to its credit, it will run to call your grandfather or grandmother to come because you want to say something that's very important. Obviously, you don't want to bother them just for anything. But if there's something very, very important, you can do that. You can go to the cemetery and at any given moment say, I will promise, and of course you deliver on your promise, a certain amount of tzedakah that I will give for that neshama, whoever she or he is, if she or he brings my grandfather or grandmother here because I want to say something to her. Yeah.
What happened to the destruction of the cemetery?
But obviously then we don't know where it is. It's a little bit more difficult. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that Avodat Zara?
No, you're probably talking about, maybe that's no. What you're talking about is Doresh El Hametim. That's what you mean?
Yeah,
Communicating with the dead? No, it's not. No. Remember, the Ishtatchut Al HaKever is something which is only for big Mekubalim and Tzadikim. They know how to do with the proper Kavanot and Yichudim and how to make the connection with the Neshama that happens to be from the same root as theirs. What it does and why they do it, it's not for us to discuss. Yeah, but it's something very incredible. But it's not something for us to discuss. It's a certain type of kavanah, a certain type of meditation, if we can call it that is very powerful. Anyway, let's finish and then we'll take questions. You may be wondering about another phenomena. What is a ghost? Here we spoke about nefesh, ruach, neshama. What about ghosts? What are they? According to our tradition, a ghost is a disembodied spirit, right? Disembodied spirit that probably has no menucha. It may have been murdered. And at many times, or at certain times, no rest, no peace. It cannot go to Gan Eden, doesn't go to Gehenom, it floats around, or it comes back at certain times around its place where it was last seen. Lincoln's ghost has been seen many times in the White House by many people. So they must have seen something. And this ghost is, as I said, a disembodied spirit, which is a part of the nefesh. It's either the nefesh itself or some part of the nefesh that is going around. But what's interesting about this is that this nefesh, ruach or neshama, has the same form. If we would be able to see it, it has the same form, and sometimes they do materialize. It has the same form as in real life. Upstairs, the neshama or the nefesh or whatever has a very similar form or look to what it had while it was alive. And according to one opinion that I saw, it even has that look before it is born. So before it is born, it already has a certain look that it's going to be shaped and formed, and that is the way it looks, and that look it retains later on. By the way, speaking about ghosts, there are other kinds of spiritual entities that we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks when we talk about demons and angels. Other spiritual entities that exist with us, but in a different dimension, the mimad acher. So we'll talk about that also another time. When does the nefesh come into the human body? There's different opinions in the Kabbalah as to when it exactly starts. I think the basic consensus is that a part of the nefesh, which we call the neshama, enters during the time of conception. That is when it's determined what mazal it will have. Tipazu matehe alea, as the Gemara says, what will be about, what kind of a life she or he will have. So the neshama enters at the time of conception. However, the nefesh grows with the blood, with the fetus. And the second opinion is that the nefesh only comes at the very, very end, when the baby is about to be born. Now, once the baby comes out, as soon as the head comes out, something else arrives. That's called the tselem. There's something called the tselem, which the Zohar speaks about more at length. Tselem is like a shadow that envelops the entire body for his whole life, and it goes away about 30 days before this individual dies. So when the tselem goes away, animals and birds can tell this guy has 30 days to live, or less than 30 days to live, because the tselem is missing. One who's sensitive can also observe that. There are ways to know if a person is about to leave this